Episode number 13.
You are listening to the More Than a Lawyer podcast with your host, Janine Esbrand. I'm here to help lawyers and mums to thrive in their careers and motherhood. I share tips, strategies, and inspirational conversation with awesome women to help you reduce the struggle in your juggle.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm really excited about today's episode. If you are anything like me, you enjoy reading. My guest today runs a business called Nurturing Literacy, and she shares with us the importance of reading to our babies from a very young age and continuing to read with them as they grow older. We also chat about a range of other topics, such as how she rebuilt her life after divorce, facing your fears and being courageous and allowing yourself to make decisions based on your strengths and not on your fear. We really had a great conversation and I learned so much from Tara Clancy. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Thank you so much for being here today. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a bit about you?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me as your guest. It's very exciting. As you said, my name is Tara, and I'm a single mom of two kids. Tim is 12 and Serena is 7. And I am an educator by training, and I recently got into the online entrepreneurial part of business.
You said you're an educator by training, and I know that we talked before about you're into literacy and you're developing this literacy brand, and so tell us more about that and how you got there.
Sure. I'm a reading specialist by training, and I have over 20 years of experience of working in the schools and privately with kids, their families, and teachers. And really what I believe is that, we have so many struggling readers, and the best thing that we can do to help a struggling reader is to help them become struggling readers in the first place. And what I mean by that is, get them help early on, and read to them as much as possible as early on, and for as long as possible too.
Okay. So what does that what does your program look like? Because I'm a fairly new mum now. My son's 1, and I've been reading to him from day one. Like I just love to sit with him and read with him. And now seeing him point out words and point to words, I'm seeing that he's actually taking it in. And so, from your perspective, what types of things do you recommend or encourage parents to do with their children from the beginning?
Well, that's exactly what I would encourage a young parent to do, young moms and young dads. Just, when you are reading from books, you're first of all just instilling in the child that great warm feeling that comes from sharing that literacy act. You're also teaching them things like directionality about the book. You hold a book a certain way. The letters, the words should look a certain way. You turn the page a certain way. All of those are pre-readiness things. But more importantly, what you're doing is you're teaching them and giving them the exposure to the language. And that language is what's going to allow them to really become, successful readers later. For one, because they enjoy it, and 2, because they have the background that they need to really take in the skill that they start to learn in school.
Okay. So what made you, I guess... a lot of our listeners are women that are going through some kind of transition in their life. So you said you started off in education, and now you're moving towards the kind of online space and entrepreneurial space. So tell me a bit about that transition. How did you get from there to there?
Yeah. So I guess I would back up even a little bit more to just give you the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So my transition really kind of started about probably 6 years ago. I had been married, to somebody I met when I was 15, and so, you get married and, you have children and stuff. And And sometimes it works out great. You see that couple, 80 years old walking along hand in hand, and it's like, oh, that's so lovely. And then other times it's not like that.
Yeah.
So for us, it was not like that. And I stayed in for a really long time, and I found I was getting increasingly unhappier and just really not in a good place. And I thought, you know what, I have 2 kids, and I can't really afford to be unhappy, and I can't afford to let them see a relationship that isn't, one that I would want them to have in their own lives. So, I made the decision to end my marriage. But it took a long time to really get to that point, because I had been sort of, a little perfectionist in my thinking. Oh, I can make this work. I can figure it out. This can be great. And also, there was an element of like being afraid. Those 2 young kids were also 2 young kids, and to leave, a relationship and go back to work full time, be a single mom. All those things were things that really scared me. But, I started doing some reading on certain things to just find out about looking at things from more of like a strength-based perspective rather than from a fear-based decision-making perspective. And, and that's when I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I have these 2 young kids, and it's a change I need to make. So I did do that. And, I went out and got a return to work full time, and managed somehow with, an almost 2-year-old and a 7-year-old,
Wow.
almost kind of, somehow you figure it out.
Yeah.
And along the way, one of the books that I read was called Finding Your Genius, and it basically led you through a bunch of exercises and told a bunch of stories to help you figure out what it is that underlies everything that you do that really is your genius. And what I figured out is that mine is figuring it out and kind of making it work. I can always do that. So, as I'm going through as the single mom early on, I'm saying, I can figure this out. I can make it work. And I did. And so then I was in this job that, it was good, but there were some things that weren't great. And of course, any situation is like that, not everything is rosy. But I found that as a few years went on, I was getting less and less satisfied in that job and more frustrated. And I was starting to feel it at home, and I was starting to feel it in my interactions with my kids, because the frustration was just mounting. And I didn't want to leave, though, because I didn't want to give up my health insurance and, and that kind of thing. And then, oddly enough, one day I was actually out rock climbing, and I was up, about 190 feet above the ground.
Wow.
And there was this move that I had to make that I knew I was safe because I was, in the right equipment and everything. But when I looked down, I thought, oh my gosh, if I jump out for this and I miss it, I'm going to swing and I could hit, something. And I felt a real pang of fear. And I said, you know what? I'm going to make it work. And I just made the leap. I grabbed it, I pulled myself up, and boy, did I feel like a sense of accomplishment like I hadn't felt in a long time.
Wow.
So then that Monday, when I went back into work, I was walking down the hallway and I was just not in a happy mood. And I said, you know what? I can make it work, whatever it is. I can do this. This is what I've been doing for years now. And within a month, I left that job, and I decided to go to consulting full time. Mm-hmm. And then I started to hear about online business and everything, and I really hadn't heard anything about it prior to that.
Yeah.
So my original intention was to just develop a website to get my name out there for consulting. And then when I started hearing about all the other things that you can do, mm-hmm. Through an online avenue, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to completely change this around, and I'm going to really not just focus on consulting with kids who have reading challenges, but really look to get my message out there. Because what I really think is that, we look at kids who have reading trouble and we focus on that, and we don't look at like what the emotional toll that those reading struggles are taking We don't look at how physical things contribute to reading difficulties, like if they have food sensitivities and all these kinds of things. So I said, I'm going to, start a blog to try to get this information out there, to try to help people, look more broadly at why their child might be struggling and what we can do about it.
Wow.
So that was then my big shift, and it was like, whoa, I got to get a website. I got to find out about this. I got to figure all these things out. But I went back to my genius, what I had discovered. I said, you know what, I will make it work. And that's what I've been doing now. And it's, it's exciting.
I that approach is just so amazing. I follow the Marie TV by Marie Forleo, and I was a student in her B school, and one of the things that she talks about, she's a life coach and business coach, and one of the things that she talks about is the fact that everything is figure outable. Like that's one of her mantras. So you just talking about that just reminded me of what she said, and it's so true. If you have that mindset that I'm going to figure this out, you absolutely will figure it out.
And I agree with 100%. And I think it's when you can get over that fear-based decision mentality and shift to the other side of saying, no, I can do it. I can figure it out somehow. That's when all of a sudden everything changes, because, twice I've been in the situation of making decisions from a fear-based perspective. And, even the second time when I was, staying in that job, I didn't realize until after the fact. I was like, you know what? I'm doing the exact same thing that I did in my marriage. I'm staying in this job because I'm afraid to leave it. I'm not, and then all of a sudden when I realized that, I said, Jesus, I will figure it out, and so it really, it's amazing when you get to that, that place where you start thinking from a strength-based perspective.
Yeah.
And then it's good to remember too that you can get sidelined, and then have to, kind of get yourself back to that place again. It's, I think, that endless roller coaster, those up and downs of life, you know. But it's like each time you go through something, you acquire more, more experience, more skills, and a stronger mindset. So even if you do go through some experience that kind of throws you for a loop, you can often get out of it and get back on track more readily.
Because you remember that you've done it before, and so it worked out last time, so it will work out this time.
Exactly.
And I think you talking about the fear, but then the courage that you gained when you just said, right, I'm just going to do it. I think a lot of the time in relationships is hard, and the fact that you went from being in an unhappy marriage to then now being a single mum, that's a major shift. So for you, other than the challenge of now having to do things by yourself, were there any other challenges that you experienced that you maybe didn't anticipate when you were thinking about making that shift?
Not that comes to mind immediately. I mean, the funny thing when I did make the shift was so many people would say to me, like all of a sudden new people come into your life, like child care people and just new friends, because you move and you have different situations. And so many people would say to me, well, wait a second, you just moved, you have a brand new job, you're in a divorce, and you have young kids, and like, you seem happy, and I would go, well, yeah, because like the overall like stress and like junk that comes from a bad relationship was gone. So even though there were other stressors, it was less than it had been.
Yeah.
So so I think that that made it a little bit easier. So the reason that I mention that is because sometimes when you're trying to decide, geez, how would I end up being able to make it work, you also like think a bit of like there will be changes and there will be some losses, but there will be gains too. And for me, one of the big gains was not having all that conflict every day in my life. And it really did give me back a lot of time and energy that had been going down the tubes in the marriage. It gave me all this time and energy to really get to bring to every day. So, I think that's another thing to think about. Like we said, moving from fear-based decision to strength-based decision making, and also thinking about, yes, I will leave some things behind, but I will also gain some things if I make this transition. And that's true with leaving a marriage, becoming a mom, right?
Any
anything.
transition. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, and my sister is, she's due with her first baby in just about, at the end of the month. And so she's all, in that, she's super excited, but she also recognizes there'll be things that will be completely different,
Yeah.
But,
those early days of motherhood are just a shock. And I don't think anyone
absolutely.
can prepare you for them. Because I remember saying, nobody told me it was going to be like this. Nobody told me it was going to be this hard. But then I thought to myself, actually, even if they did tell me, I wouldn't have fully appreciated what it was until you actually go through it and you actually live it, and you don't really get it.
I agree with you 100%. People can say how you won't get any sleep, and you go, oh, really?
You don't get
and then all of a sudden,
what that means.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about your kids and like how you're juggling. So now that you're running your own business, how and your kids are a little older. So how are you managing the juggle with being, I guess, in their lives, they've probably got loads of stuff going on as a 12 and 7-year-old, and then your business, and then the stuff you do for you. How do you juggle that?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I think life was a little bit easier when they were younger because, they would be in after school programs, and things like that. But I found as they were getting a little bit older, I just felt like I needed to be with them more. And that was part of why I made the transition to this kind of work as well, because this gives me the flexibility that I really want and need. Like every morning I'm home now to be able to make them breakfast, and just do different things, or I can set up my schedule to work in a different way so that I do have that time with them. I mean, if we think about, being a mom, and we were just talking about the jolt that you experience when you become a new mom. Seriously, with the 12-year-old now, I say all the time, like hands down, the easiest part of being a mom for me was having an infant, because it's, you know what they need, right? They need to be nursed, they need to be changed, they need to be held. They maybe need a little sleep, and then they're good, right? But the older they get, the more complex the needs get, and the more varied the demands get. And so it's like sometimes you think, oh, they're older now, so it's a little bit easier. But in my case, I think they're older now, and it's more challenging because it's more than just time,
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I really, really appreciate about having this flexibility with this kind of work, to be there more for them, and to be able to go to school events, and volunteer at certain things. It really does make a huge difference.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good point to raise, the fact that at different stages of motherhood and in different stages of your journey, the challenge is going to be different. So things are going to shift, and I've experienced that in a short space of time as a mum, that as soon as you start getting used to something and you think you've got it all figured out, it just changes. And
Absolutely.
I know that going into the teen years is a whole new kettle of fish. My mum will always say that between the ages of 12 and 16, I was horrible. I was just not a nice, I was not a nice person, and we had a lot of arguments, and I came through the other side, and now we get on really well. But those years were like really a lot of slamming of doors and sulking and tears, and so
I think I'd have to say mine might have even been 12 to 17. It was really hard. When my son starts giving me flack now, I think, okay, here's my payback.
Exactly.
Now I know what my parents went through, But you're right. It is the ever-changing landscape. You like, who is it? Buddhism. In Buddhism, that they say the only constant is change. That's the only thing you really can be sure of. And certainly parenting it's true in parenting. You never quite know, it doesn't ever, it's not level. There's the needs are, the stages are so strange and varied, and, you can't anticipate them.
And
But
I think it's a good idea to acknowledge that things will change, because if you're in a mindset that, you know, let's not get comfortable with this because things are going to shift, then when it happens, you're not fighting against it, but you kind of go with the flow. And I think the same can apply for in your career, because when you start out in your career, you might be, you know, you make decisions about what you're going to do at a really young age, and you change along the way. And so the way that you view what you're doing may change, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to stay in the same career, in the same job for your whole of your working life just because that's what you decided to do at the beginning.
exactly.
It's okay to shift and move with it and develop and change direction if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. Like, I think it's almost like the healthiest thing you can do, you know, to anticipate this the change, you know, because if you do, you know, if you are thinking that one thing is going to just be a constant, you know, you really can get completely blindsided if it does indeed change. So yeah, if you just go with the flow, like you said, and you know, anticipate change. You know, you don't know what the change will be.
Yeah,
But you know, and then but to go back to what we were talking about before, you know, the figuring it out idea.
Mm-hmm.
When that change, you say, okay, there'll be changes, and I'll figure it out. You know, and no. That's part of like the challenge of parenthood and life in general, and it's also part of the reward to be able to say, hey, I did that. Kind of like when I did that climb, you know, got up that jump I was trying to get, and said, wow, you know, it was a great feeling. It was the same thing like when something happens with one of my kids, and one of them says something or does something in a certain way, you just say, man, you know, there's that feeling of accomplishment and pride as a parent that is like nothing else, you know.
And
so,
thinking about the climbing, I think it's awesome that you do rock climbing. I tried it one time inside. It was like one of those climbing walls inside. I got stuck.
Yeah.
I got to the top, and I just couldn't. I didn't have enough strength to pull myself up, but it was an awkward kind of wall, so then I couldn't get back down again. So I was just there for a while until I kind of figured out that I just had to find the strength from somewhere to move.
I think we have like a certain inner strength that allows us to, to do that kind of thing. It's obviously a physiological thing, you know, that because we're women, we can do that. But I think there's also a certain part of our psyche or our collective selves or something that just really is special and just really allows us to, you know, have that extra little whatever it is
that's needed. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing I would just ask of you to do is share with us like a tip that you would give to any woman who is going through some kind of transition now. So we've talked a lot about moving from kind of fear-based to strength-based decision making. But is there anything else that you would encourage a woman maybe going through a similar journey to you in terms of going through a divorce, or someone who's just generally going through a change?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing that I found helpful was journaling. And they kind of say that when if you journal about something 3 times, you kind of get the clarity that you need. And I think that was definitely true in my case. I kept a journal the whole time through the end of my marriage and through my divorce. And I kept a journal when I was deciding to leave my job. And basically, you know, it comes with fear and anxiety and all those things. And so by journaling and just letting yourself get your thoughts onto the paper and out of your head, and then doing it again the next day and then a third time, it does give you, a clarity that helps you then be able to say, okay, I see what I'm thinking, and I see where my mind is sort of running around in circles. I get it now, and you can then move forward in the best, the best possible way, because you've sort of given yourself a chance to get it out and get it down concretely. So journaling, I think, is a great thing to do. because it also gives you a little more assurance that you're doing the right thing because you haven't just jumped into it. You've gotten it down, you've been thinking about it, and you know how our minds work. We're only aware of a small amount of the conscious thought that we have, right? So you write it down and then you go to sleep or you go to work or you go out and you do some rock climbing, whatever it may be. But it's still there in the back of your mind, and your mind is still massaging it and figuring it out so that when you go and write it down again the next time, you bring so much more to it. And so that is really why I think journaling is an excellent thing to do in general, but particularly when you have it, you're at a transition point, because it really gives you the exercise that you need, the mental exercise to get your thoughts and your feelings together, really.
Yeah, I love that. I've always kind of kept a diary. When I was younger, I kept a diary, kind of like a dear diary. I'd write what I did in the day, kind of thing. And then as I got older, it kind of turned into more like a prayer journal. But I haven't really done it in the way where I've gone over things over and over, like you just described. It's more just kind of a one-off, thoughts in my head and then move on. But I might try and do that and see, how that helps me with clarity and stuff.
Right. And especially like it is, when it is something that is troubling you, or something where you have to make a decision, that's because I have times too, or like, for example, I when I was pregnant with each of my children, I wrote journals to them that they could then, I could read to them to tell them what I was thinking at that point in the pregnancy and stuff. So those were the same thing, just that particular day, what was going on, what was my thought, because I wasn't feeling any kind of conflict or anything. At any point where I did have a lot going on and I just was feeling sort of overwhelmed and trying to figure it out, then that was really where I found that journaling, several times on a topic to really help me out.
Awesome. Well, it's been so good chatting with you and hearing about your story and your journey. Do you want to share with us like where people can find out more about you and maybe your business? If you want to share a bit about the reading literacy business that you are a founder of.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. My website is called Nurturing Literacy. And so that's www.nurturingliteracy.com. And as I mentioned, my hope really, it's kind of twofold. One is to really change the state of literacy in our world. And I think the big way to do that is, one, to help kids get help early. Any kid who shows signs of struggle, to give them the support early on. And then to really nurture the love of literacy through the lifespan, because we really all do a great job of reading to our kids when they're little. But then somewhere around 7, 8, maybe even 9 years old, we stop reading to our kids, one, because they've started reading themselves, and two, because they're doing it in school, and life is getting so much busier, so there's less time for it. And then three, we're also glad to finally get a break from, say, oh, there's one last thing that I have to do. But that's also the same time when kids start to read less for a few reasons. One is because their social circle starts getting wider, so they start doing more with friends. There's also all the electronic devices that we have, that starts pulling them away. And soon our kids start to stagnate as readers because they come to view reading as something that you do in school because you have to, and not something that you do because you want to. So that's why I think we really need to keep reading to our kids, starting from the time they're newborns and all the way up until they're 19, to really keep that love of literacy in there. And that's why I call my website Nurturing Literacy, and that's what I'm working on.
Oh, I love it. I love books. I love to read. I love knowledge. And so, your business is awesome. So I will definitely put a link to it in the show notes so that people can head over to your site and learn more. Oh, it's great to talk to Tara today. I hope that you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. It is really great for me to speak to a mother who is further along in her journey than I am, and someone who's been through a difficult time and been able to bounce back. It's great to speak to resilient people and see how they handle challenges. So I hope you learn a lot from that conversation and that you will be able to apply some of the principles to your situations. I will put a link to Tara's website in the show notes, and she's also provided a special resource page for my listeners, and I'll also put the link to that. So head over to lightboxcoaching.com/episode 13 so that you can view the show notes and you can get access to those links. If you are at a stage where you are trying to figure out how motherhood is going to integrate with your career and your work life, I would encourage you to head over to my site and sign up for my free training on how to have post-baby career success. You can sign up on the homepage of the website and you get access to the replay of a webinar I did last month, and it is going to give you some really great tips on how you can go about structuring things so that you can have career success after becoming a mum. Before I go, just a reminder to subscribe to the show and to leave a rating and review in iTunes so that more women just like you can find this show and join in the conversation. So until next time, look after you and look after your babies. Bye.
The More Than a Lawyer podcast features music from Ben Sound.